Good evening, everyone. It's glad to see everybody. Today is August 1st, believe it or not, 2024. This is your regular session of a Unified Government Board of Commissioners. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that some commissioners, staff, and the public are attending remotely, and they may be watching by Zoom. They may be on their phone, and I know some are on site. All participants joining by phone should please mute their phones at this time when not speaking to avoid any background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so that the public that is observing knows exactly who is speaking. Please make sure that when you speak clearly and directly and at an audible level directly into the microphone so that your comments can be captured by our clerk and be heard by all those that would like to hear what you have to say. This is critical given the number of remote participants and its current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. If public comments are allowed on an agenda item, please keep your comments limited to the item or topic for discussions and make sure that we abide by the rules of procedures. And what that means is your comments should not include any rude or derogatory comments. And that we make sure that we maintain the integrity of decorum that we've all come to expect here in your commission chambers. With that, I will now call this meeting to order. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Davis. We have an absence memo. Bynum. Here. Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Burns.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Kane.
Here.
Lopez.
Here.
Stites.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, clerk. Tonight we'll have our invocation given by Commissioner Hill. I'll ask everybody please to stand, and immediately after the invocation, we will have the pledge of allegiance.
Will you bow your heads, please? Father, we just thank you for this another evening where we can come together and work together. We praise you, we lift you up, we adore you. We realize that there's nothing impossible for you. We pray that your Holy Spirit reign over this meeting and that like never before, you do a new thing to bring us together to uphold the community and the work that you have put our hands and feet to do together. In Jesus' name, we thank you in advance. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, for that word of prayer. Clerk, are there any revisions to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mayor, 2 updates have been issued for the agenda this evening. The first agenda update added item number 12, an ordinance authorizing special use permit SP 2024-030 at 5510 Kansas Avenue to the agenda. The second agenda update added item number 1 to the mayor's agenda. It's the mayor's veto related to the Community Benefits Fund and home repairs. These are all the revisions to the agenda this evening.
Thank you, clerk. That takes us to the administrator's agenda, which is the first item. And it's the only item under the administrator's agenda this evening. It's a presentation from our county administrator, Mr. David Johnson, of the amended 2024 budget and proposed 2025 budget for the unified government. I'll turn the meeting over to our county administrator and he will make the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity. It was about a couple of months, a year ago, where I had the opportunity to start a baptism by fire, being hired, and then start the budget process last year. And I think one of the things that we learned a lot about that budget that carry over into this year and subsequent years. But we do have a new twist with this budget, and we'll get into that in a minute. But every budget year is unique. But we always have to start with commission priorities. So in January, the commission, you gave me these 4 priorities for this fiscal year, and carrying it over into the next year is uphold fiscal sustainability. And we'll have a lot of that talk tonight. Foster economic development. We need to have an expanded tax base. We need to create jobs in our community. We need to create a better atmosphere to invite investment in our community to keep this community viable and moving forward. The next one is, which I think we've heard criticisms about, our quality of customer service and the need to have improved communication with our population. That's quite a challenge. I think we can do better in internal actions of our staff to do better customer service to our stakeholders, to our citizens, to our investors. And that's going to be a focus over the next year and a half to be a mandated improvement. But this idea of improved communication is a considered challenge for our community. We're not a typical county seat, shall we say. We're in an urban area. A typical county seat would have a regular newspaper that provides all the news that's going on in the community in one source. Also have a local radio station that everybody reads, and there's always local news that you can pick up there. We don't have either. We rely on regional media coverage. And therefore, we've improved, under your guidance, a strategic communications department to have a better presence with our media. And they've developed good networks with the reporters, both in radio, TV, and print. But we've also increased our presence on social media, use of our website and all that. What we always find out is we can always do better on those fronts. Having access to technology is a limitation for certain people in our communities. Not everybody has access to a computer. Not everybody uses social media. So we can't rely on just that as our communication. And therefore, you're going to be seeing work out of our communications department, new ways to get the word out and to help you represent your constituents better. And then we always have to make sure that we improve our infrastructure, because that's one of the major responsibilities that local government has, is to have a good, adequate infrastructure that supports mobility within the community, use it as a sale point to attract investment, and to really make this community shine, to be able to get from point A to point B in a good time and a safe way to get to those places. So those are our 4 priorities that you gave me to work with our staff. So today we're embarking on the work of the 25 budget. We've had workshops with you and all that. Here's just a snapshot of the activities that we've had this year. 7 commission budget workshops, 5 dot talk conversations. We've had the work of using a budget simulator to have people share their ideas about how would they deal with budget issues facing the UG. And you can see on the city side, we had 118 folks get on there and share their ideas, 79 on the county side. And then this is another depiction of that summation, and that is a flow chart that shows from February to the present of when we have had those sessions. And to start off this budget process in earnest, let's just take a quick reflection on what this current 24 budget looks like. On the left side, you have the Kansas City budget of approximately $354 million. You can see that the general fund makes up just over 50% of that. Bond and interest fund is one of the other larger ones. Proprietary, that's enterprise funds, stormwater, wastewater, solid waste. And then you have special revenue. But then on the right side, you have the county budget. And you can see about 3/4 of the county budget is financed through the general fund. And then they have two others, a park and rec fund and other tax levies like mental health, disabilities, et cetera, that have their own levy. But we're to talk about the 25 budget. And so where do we go from here? At the June 27th commission meeting, you voted to give us a policy direction to use revenue neutral as the model for the 2025 budget. And that's what I'm here today, is to show you the work of the staff on my recommended budget to you that I'm handing off to you today. And as you can see, there will be a public hearing on the budget on the 13th with, by state statute and time frames, you must pass on the 15th. I do want to say something about this timeliness. If we were in a normal budget year where we did not see a need to do revenue neutral, we would have had 6 more weeks to work on this budget. But because of the way the state statute reads, we had to spend the month of July focusing on creating a budget that I'm presenting today. And I think you'll see that there are going to be a lot of changes in the budget with what revenue neutral mandates us to do. So let's start on what is the revenue neutral rate. It's a tax rate for the current year that would generate the same property tax revenue as this year. And what does that mean if a mill levy is reduced if the current property valuations have increased? And according to our appraiser, we've had about an 11-12% increase in our appraised value throughout the county. So we should see a mill levy reduction. For us to be able to provide a similar level of services that we're providing today, we're going to have to make budget cuts. Basically, a big driver of that, we're not immune to inflation. And therefore, we have to embed inflation costs because the cost of doing business, supplies, et cetera, don't go away because we're government. We have to buy those things in the market, and therefore we have to take care of inflation. So that takes a chunk away from the pot of money that we have to deal with. And then there are those other increased costs of goods, materials, and personnel. Now, as right before and after the vote on the 27th, before the vote, Commissioner Burrows, after the vote, Commissioner Townsend reminded all of us in the chamber that night that if we go revenue neutral, there will be impacts. They were very straightforward, that statement. And I think our goal was to minimize those impacts, but we still had to have a balanced budget. That does not go away. So we had to talk about the basic budgetary rules we had to follow. First, we have this statutory requirement to present to you a balanced budget tonight. Second, you gave us a policy direction to incorporate the revenue neutral option that the state statute allowed you to consider, and you voted on and gave us that direction to implement. We are talking about residential BPU pilot relief, which has been a topic of discussion this year very vocally on many fronts that we brought into the process. Since the recession at the end of the first decade of this century, to balance the budget to deal with the impacts of that recession, it started for the first time in earnest using reserves to balance the budget. Reserves are supposed to create your rainy day fund, to be used in times of emergencies, to get you through tough times, but there's an expectation that then you replenish it. Our goal was not to use fund balances in this budget. And then we wanted to prioritize employees who are doing the hard work to provide the services to our citizens and our community. You will see no layoffs in this budget, only reduced vacant positions. And we included cost of living adjustments to both the union and non-union employees. I felt that that was an important equity issue, that we treat all employees with dignity, and if they gave good hard work, all deserve to be rewarded with something. And finally, because revenue neutral affects all of the property tax revenue that we can collect, it affects how we can use debt too. Find out this year, 44% of our property tax bill that each of us pay on the city side pays for debt. We talked about this last year. That's too much. That was a habit that was started in the first decade of this century. A way to accomplish certain goals, a way to get ahead on deferred maintenance and the like. But you can only go to debt for so long. And what I've always been trained, you should not have a debt level more than 20%. The bond market says if we want to improve our bond rating, we should have a reserve of over 30%. So as you can see that that's not, bond rate is to have a reserve of 30% or more. So we can't continually balance our budget using debt, and we should have debt down, but not at a 40+% rate. That's not sustainable in the long run. So we're going to start by reviewing the city general fund. This depicts empirically what is revenue neutral. And you look at the first orange blocked area. In 2024, we had a property tax revenue stream that amounted to about $35.14 million. Revenue neutral means that's frozen. That's the maximum that we can collect for the 25 budget. So as you can see, 35,149 and change is fixed throughout. Matt Willard, our appraiser, said that we would have had an appraised increase of about 11–12%. You could see, you could incorporate that if you would have chosen to the maximum exceed revenue neutral rate, 12% more than the 35 million that you see there. So that money is not available. That's frozen. We also have, so it means flat property tax revenue for 25, no growth revenue to provide services. The original estimate of having increased revenue from our initial sources was $3.88 million. We'll talk about that, but that's not available. We also made sure that one of the things we heard from the public is our take of the BPU pilot was high. It's at 11.9%. And we were reminded through the process that years ago, as the UG was increasing the percentage to charge for the pilot was increasing, there was a reminder that there was a promise by a previous administration that we would get to the 9.9%. We're at 11.9% now. So we're decided we should use this opportunity to get toward that promise. So we plugged in a 1% reduction in our pilot take from the BPU revenue. And that's only for residential customers only. So we also, that $2 million, $2.2 million there, I think that $1.1 million was approximately what the 1% reduction in BPU revenue is. But the other $1.1 million amounts to news that we received over the last couple weeks. GM is retrofitting its plant next year for about 4, 5, 6 months. And so their electric bill will go down. And so we worked with BPU to get an understanding what that will do to our revenue stream. Also, we looked at other issues that are related to the GM. There's other, as we were reminded by our Commissioner Kane, you know, it's not just GM, but there are suppliers to GM. So when GM's down, they're down too. So we'll see less electric consumption. Also, we had to play with estimating the amount we would get from the BPU pilot, because if we use this year's number, what we are getting from BPU staff is the winter this year was mild. Yeah, we had some cold days, but we didn't have cold months. And so the electric usage by the customers were lower than in 23. So we used the 23 numbers to help us create, I think, a more comfortable conservative approach to guesstimate our BPU revenue. So when all that's said and done is we are reducing our BPU pilot revenue projection by $2.2 million. And also what you have here is comparing all the taxes and charges and all the revenue that goes into the general fund, 24 to 25. And so you can see a $2 million increase, 179 to 181 for next year. And that difference isn't because of property taxes, because of the increases cumulatively of the other funds. So we start off, we had a original projected revenue surplus or increase of $3.8 million. But we took out the residential pilot relief of 1% and other adjustments to the pilot. That's 2.2 million. Subtract that from the 3.8. And we had to acknowledge the fact that last year we used, or this year, we had to use reserves to balance this budget. And then that needs to be viewed as carrying over as operating expenses into next year's budget. But we're not using any more revenue from the reserves to balance the 25 budget. Here's some other identified expense increases for 25 that amount to 11.9 million. Employee contractual, that's our union agreements, and COLA payments for non-union amounting to 4.25 million on the city side. We looked at our health reserve. We had programmed an increase for both the employer and the employee to pay 7% each for increased medical coverage. When we looked at the reserve that we had, we dropped that down to 3%. So that 3% needs to be covered. Again, you've heard us talk about, we look at personnel and we normally budget at a 93% occupancy rate. So we rely on that 7% gap. And then, but we've hired more aggressively this year, and we're above that 93% to a tune we estimate about 2.3 million. So we have to account for that in the budget. We also have increased costs to IT software agreements. And since we've had a couple over the last couple of years incidents with cybersecurity, We have to make sure that we're continuing to invest in cybersecurity for the entire system of the UG. And both of those amount to about $550,000. Initially, we were going to bolster the litigation fund that pays out settlements. And we felt that was too high. So we're looking at not funding $1 million, but about $270,000 more into our fund. That $2.4 million for KCATA, that's our partner on transit. They received a significant ARPA grant to help fund the regional transit system during COVID. And so COVID emergency is over. The federal government's grants to them are over. We received a $4.8 million annual grant to pay for transit services. Now, that $2.4 million reflects the fact that the information we got from ATA is that grant ends June 30, 2025. We don't have $2.4 million to carry over for the next 6 months. So we had to account for that in our budget. And we're working with ATA about adjusting the routes around the area that will make up the gap. Now, what is concerning is for 2025, we have to just deal with a $2.4 million gap in funding from ATA. The whole 4.8 goes into 2026. So it's imperative that we take a hard look at the transit issues like zero fare, which is about $700,000 that we pay for zero fare throughout the metro area. Can we continue to do that? 2 communities within the region have discontinued that. So we'll have to have some interesting policy discussions on transit. There is also $870,000 for additional projects and equipment that we dealt with. So when you add and subtract all those numbers, we have a $10.6 million gap to close in the city budget. And that was the news that we gave and shared with our staff, our department directors, and gave them ideas, or we charged them and empowered them to come up with ideas to how that department will help us meet that gap. We asked them to create scenarios. We asked them to look hard at their operating costs and what could they forgive. And here's a list of $8.9 million suggestions that we've received from the city departments. In transportation, there's that $2.4 million. We're looking at reducing some of our fixed routes throughout the city. In the fire department, we've identified about $2.3 million that need to be contributed by them. One, when the commission reopened the Fairfax, it was decided if we don't get a safer grant, we're going to give $950,000 to make sure it's staffed. And there it got staffed, but then we got a safer grant. We did not apply that safer grant toward the expenses of the Fairfax, but use it throughout the entire fire system. We're dedicating what we said safer was going to do, and that was going to pay for the operations of the Fairfax, which is being paid for by overtime firefighters. So you reduce the overtime need. That frees up that $950 to be used still within the fire department to meet the other needs within the area in staffing and overtime. And then the fire management and the fire union will be working to come up with the balance. Some things are outlined in the fire master plan that you'll hear about in a couple months. Some are looking at the operation costs of the fire department, equipment needs, et cetera, et cetera. The police department has committed to look at $1.9 million in cuts through overtime and multiple cuts on other line items that they have. Parks and Recreation is looking at a reduction of just over $500,000. That's to reduce one of the two abatement teams that are used to pick up illegal dumping throughout the community. And we're also looking to rebid all the mowing contracts for the land bank policies and say they're not going to be mowed every 2 weeks, but maybe every 3 or 4 weeks, and see what pricing we can get out of those services. Community-wide, we're looking at a $440,000 reduction, reducing funding to outside agencies that we work with. And also, we're looking to funding continue to fund at 2024 rate levels, the senior sales tax and utility waiver program, but to still have that at the 2024 level. If you remember, we had good news on that. It went from like $140,000 in that program in 23. Last year, we were just over $500,000 in requests. So we'll keep it funded at 24 levels. In county administration, my office we talked about staffing the intergovernmental affairs office. We're going to freeze that for a year, and all their staff salaries and the like. Other community services, a reduction of $620,000. Some reductions to the NRC, to outside agencies. Restructuring the economic development department. This has a couple positions that are vacant but were funded, and we're going to defer that till 26. I do want to make a note, which is of good news. As of yesterday, I hired a new economic development director. So I will also add an editorial comment. She wants to live in Wyandotte County. I didn't write that in the job description. She volunteered that. But if you remember, that was one of the major weaknesses for 5 candidates I wanted to bring before, and they said, it's one of the reasons I really don't want to live in Wyandotte County, and said, it's a requirement, sorry. So we kept looking, and I think you'll be impressed. Also, we're talking about a reduction of funding to Mount Carmel for Willa Gill services, but it's reduced funding from the general fund. There are other funds like CDBG where we can supplement that gap. But we're talking about the general fund because, remember, revenue neutral is the limit of how much property tax revenue we can collect. On general government activities, it's just over $500,000 that we're reducing budget and legal ongoing staffing, reducing IT costs where IT can make cuts, and taking a hard look at redundant technology management contracts. They realize that they have some expensive software management agreements on software no longer being used by departments. And so that will be a savings, not just for next year, but following years. The mayor has agreed to give up one of his salaried positions, and the commission, we're recommending they would give up 1/2 of their $10,000 fund for whether it's professional development or constituent relations. So instead of a $10,000 allotment, it would be $5,000. On the legislative auditor, this is a new one. Historically, the legislative auditor was funded entirely by the county budget. And as we'll show you, the county budget's in dire straits. And therefore, since the legislative auditor provides auditing services to city departments as well, city should contribute to them. And so we're picking up $600,000 on the city side to reduce that $600,000 obligation on the county side. And then the municipal court, what we're hearing from the court administrator and the judges, two judges, is that the cost to provide public defender services are going up, and the use of the public defenders is going up. And they've estimated they need about $36,000 more to pay for those required services that they have to provide defendants in our municipal court. Now we go to CIP changes. This is a longitudinal look of what we have budgeted in our CIP over the past years and moving forward, and what's a project, what's an equipment, and what's fleet transfer. And what we're doing in 2025 is freezing the project allotment. In essence, pretty much saying no debt will be used because of the revenue neutral limitations that they're allowing us to use general obligation dollars, which pays the debt for general obligation bonds. And so if we're frozen, we really are hampered by doing something in that year. So the key fund points: we've eliminated 20 FTE positions that are recently vacated, removed another, this one is not really a budget issue, but while we're cleaning house, we removed another 41 positions that have been vacant for 2 or more years. We started that last year. We said anything 3 or more. This year it's 2 or more. So we're getting more into what's the current need on the staffing table. We have included funded contractual pay increases and COLA increases for all employees, the 3% increase for health insurance, and no layoffs or furloughs. We've incorporated a 1% residential BPU pilot reduction and funding at the 24 level for 25, the senior pilot waiver program. And we plan for the impact of the GM shutdown, retrofit, whatever we're going to call it, the decreased energy use of a closed plant. And nearly every department decreased their operating costs. Only 3 departments in the city side increased, and that was IT for cybersecurity, legal litigation, about $270,000 for the fund, and the $35,000 for the municipal court public defender needs. So the summary that we have for the city general fund is this. Total revenue in 24 was $179 million. Our proposed is $181 million. That's all revenue, not property tax. And it's split out in these categories: small increase in personnel, a decrease in contractual services, commodities, pretty much driven by inflation, it's 31%. See a 31% decline in capital outlay because we can't use debt. 4% decrease in grants and claims, 2.3% increase in paying our debt, which was scheduled through our payment programs. Transfers out about $340,000 or 13.6%. So our total expenses are increased by 0.2% in this proposal. If you go to the next one, we all like pie charts. It's And as you can see, expenditures by functional area, if you look at public safety, you're looking at around 63% of the budget. And then you see the next one is community services, then general government, public works, judicial services, mayor and commission. And then we have this wonderful category called excluded. We'll have to have a talk with staff. What the heck does that mean? If you look at expenditures by cost category on the city side, nearly 75% of the general fund pays salaries and expenses, compensation expenses. We have contractual services as the next one. And then these others, debt, grants, et cetera, we showed a chart earlier on that. If you look at the 2025 revenue sources of all city funds of $356 million, you see charges for services and sales tax are our two big ones this budget year. Real estate is third. And then payment in lieu of taxes, other taxes, and all these other smaller ones make up all our city funds. And then the city general fund itself, that 18% that's on the left chart, is made up of 19% of property taxes, 33% on sales tax, payment in lieu of taxes, 21%, other taxes at 18%, and then a plethora of smaller percentages. So now we'll go to the county fund. This is the one that provided a significant amount of challenges. And I want to remind all of you, particularly the commissioners that served last year during the budget process. While we were going through the budget process, we felt very comfortable with the county because when we started that budget, we felt like we had a 20% reserve. During the middle of the budget process, we found something out. The commission passed the 23 budget, let's say in September, but then the commission passed two large expenditures for the 23 budget. I believe it was December. One for the DA for digitization of records, primarily driven by the Golubsky case that he had to deal, he continues to deal with today. And then the pay parity program for our sheriff's department. Forgot to put that in the budget model when we started in 23 for the 24 budget. And when we did, it dropped the reserves from 20% to 10%. So we started this year's budget with a reserve to the county fund of only 10%. That was one of the reasons why we had this value of not using reserves for the 25. We have to pay attention to have adequate reserves because there's going to be a day when we're going to have an emergency, and that's our rainy day fund. There's going to be a day when we're going to have to continue to use general obligation debt, and we can't have a rating agency see a department or a unit of government that has a low reserve account. They're saying that's very risky, therefore you will pay higher borrowing costs. And like I said, the rating agencies are saying, if you want to have a better rating that you're having today, you better work to get your reserves above 30%. It's a new day in the bond market. So the county general fund base recommendations, again, we highlight a box. That's what revenue neutral means to the county fund. This year, we're expected to collect just over $52 million. That's a fixed cost for next year on property tax revenue. However, the models that we are using, we're seeing some of the performance of a few of our other funds that we've relied on aren't performing well. we're expecting to see a $91,000 decrease in sales tax revenue. Other taxes, we're looking to see a decrease of $1.8 million. One of those is driven by vehicle tags. People, because of interest rates, aren't buying new cars. So therefore, the tag amount is on older vehicles. And then you're seeing other license permit fees, et cetera, reduce 154. Charges for services, you're seeing an uptick of just over half $500,000. Fines and forfeitures close to 160. Interest income took a hit because the revenue or the investment streams that government can invest in usually are government securities. And the interest rates in government securities have been abysmally low. And so we're expected to lose $1.1 million in revenue, expected revenue. Can't count on that. And then a grand total of $2.4 million in the hole from those streams added up. So here are some base assumptions. We're starting off with resources of about $4.4 million. And that's structural imbalance like we had. We had to balance this year's budget with reserves. Therefore, it has to be counted as operational this year. And new anticipated revenue being reduced by $2.4 million equals that $4.4 million. Here are some budget impacts of $7.6 million that we have to take in consideration: employee contractual and COLA pay increases of $1.6 million, health insurance at 3% for county side. It's about $250,000. Higher than anticipated employment levels. That's at, we're hiring more than 93%, about $2.1 million. IT software agreements and cybersecurity, $550,000. This is one of the more variable costs that really can't control, but we have to identify. The sheriff expects to see a need for $2.1 million to deal with the jail population. And that's that's beyond his control. And he has to follow some state guidelines as well. And then enhanced funding for projects and equipment throughout is $850,000. So we have a $12 million gap on the county side to fund. So a couple of things that we did is we looked at all the levy funds and what were their balances in reserve. And we decided to apply the UG policy of reserves to all the levy funds. And we found many levy funds that had significant amount of balance. That's money that was collected by the county taxpayer. We need to get it to use for the county taxpayer. The policy that you have in place is having a reserve of 17% minimum, ideally 25%. So we use the 25%. And what we did is those who exceeded the amount of reserves that were 25%, we took and redirected it to the county. So as you can see, some had changes, some didn't have changes in the amounts that we looked at. Some contributed, some did not. Now, the county general fund highlights of reduction, again, asking all departments to help out, gave them direction, gave them ideas. They came up with their own, and most contributed. The sheriff's office is finalizing, but he's accepted a goal of shooting for $1.2 million in savings by managing more closely his overtime and vacant position hirings. Of course, that may be a tough one for him to achieve because there's supposed to be 2 large court cases in 25 that he'll have to have staff man, might have to have overtime costs go up. But he's going to do due diligence with his supervisors to manage the personnel and overtime costs. He's also talking about a partial funding increase regarding inmate housing, medical, meals that he expects to go up in 2025. The original request was 2.1 million. We told him we don't have the adequate money for that, and he's going to try to manage it at a $1.17 million level. If he finds that is a challenge, he'll come back. The legislative auditor, we're moving that $600,000 to the city budget since they are doing city work. Fire and police like to minimize dispatch overtime. However, overtime is driven by a labor agreement. And so they'll do their best to do that. And in the meantime, they'll look for other cuts that in dispatch that they may contribute. Parks and Recreation, a reduction in 210,000. That's the frequency in mowing land bank lots and a few capital improvement expense reductions. Because a lot of their work is paid for out of the park fund. This is the general fund budget for the parks. Public Works, 240,000 reduction. That's we have a vacancy in mapping GIS that they're willing to defer for a year or two, and deferring the maintenance for at least a year on Loring Road out in the southwest part of our county. County administration, again, adding 230,000 to not hiring intergovernmental affairs staff and a few other staffs. There are 2 paid interns assigned to my office. We're not going to fill those. You go to the next slide, which is IT. They're looking hard at miscellaneous reductions that they can find. However, we have not, we gave them money to make sure they cover cybersecurity needs. General government, our appraiser had a vacancy and he's willing to defer that out. And same with the Department of Finance. They have some vacancies that they'll put on hold, amounting close to $400,000. Other public safety, the sheriff and is working with many other departments on reducing community corrections. And we're working with the director of emergency management because he has a couple vacancies as well. And he's committed to look at keeping 2 of those vacant. With the understanding that if there is an emergency, we expect the other public agencies to step up and fill the void. Mary, this is the other part of the mayors and the commissioners give back the 1 position in the mayor's office, the county percentage, and the county percentage for the commission discretionary fund. Other community services, $150,000 reduction to funding outside organizations who we partner with. The district attorney is one of the few of getting an increase of 120,000. That's ongoing maintenance for his digitizing efforts. And I think if you've seen in the paper, the Golubsky trial is coming forward and he needs to make sure he has access to all the records. Right now, we are not able to fund additional victim advocates at this time. We've informed his office, not happy, but he was able to find a grant for 1 of a victim person to help out, and that's for sex crimes. We've asked him to look, and it was a good suggestion from the mayor, if the victim assistance staff at the police department could be piggybacking with his other, the DA's victim assistant staff, and see if that can get us through a year. So we go to the CIP. There's really not that much that we pay at the CIP. We do have some obligations, but we're freezing it next year primarily to no increased debt or CIP action. We do have building and grounds do have improvement programs still funded by ARPA capital money that will continue to be spent over the next 2 years. And they will always have their maintenance. If there's a compressor that goes off in one of our public buildings, they will always have resources to repair those or replace them as needed. So here's the fund. This is the fund balance that I was talking to you about. Transfer, this is the surplus above 25% that these tax levy funds have. So we're transferring a total of $2 million into the general fund. And we do have, and we're also transferring 1.75 into the county general fund and $267,000 into the health levy fund. Everything but the county fund will be kept at 25%. We are going from an estimate of 3% to get it to 7.5% with these transfers. He asked us to be fiscally sustainable as one of our priorities. This is one way that we do that. Key county fund budget points, reduction of 16.3 positions on recently funded positions, so we're not filling them, and additional positions that will reduce the funding liability of unfilled positions in the county general fund. So the departments are being charged to not fill certain positions. The strategic realignment of resources and balances from other county levy funds are in accordance with current UG policy that's identified the level of mills that can be reallocated from other county levy funds to supplement the county general fund shortfall and reallocation of fund balances to meet the 25% thresholds. That is current UG policy. And we're talking about funded contractual pay raises and increases for all employees, health insurance increases, as we did on the city side. And nearly every department reduced operating expenses. And we did have 3 department increases against IT for cyber, the sheriff for contractual jail costs that are partially funded, and software for the district attorney. Fund balance for the county general fund, as we showed, will be increased from an anticipated 3% to 7.5%. And we have a ways to go to get it to the 25% threshold. So that'll be an issue for future budgets. So here's the general fund summary. The original, this year's revenue is at 81.9 million. We're proposing 79.5 million. So that's a net change of negative 2.4 million. We have some transfers in of mills, transfers in of fund balance. That gets us a $2.9 million surplus from a negative 2.4 million. Then we have to deal with our personnel cost and all these other items. And it shows that the total expense in sum is about $888,000 for a net change of $2 million. So that's the county general fund. If you looked at other funds that we have responsible for, they're not levy funds. We have suggestions on that as well. Parks Combined Fund, that's the amount that the city and county put together to maintain both city and county parks, KCK parks and county parks. The mill transfer offset by other revenue increases equals a net reduction in revenue of $260,000. The structurally imbalanced that was in 2024 of $184,000. That's corrected in the 25 budget with an overall expense reduction of $443,000. To achieve that, 6 FTEs will remain vacant and reduce county general fund capital expenses. The health fund for the county is structurally imbalanced for 2024 of an amount of $279,000. We'll correct that in 2025. The overall reduction will be $362,000. Note that all ARPA funded positions are due to end in December, will not be filled. Just don't have ARPA funds anymore. The Solid Waste Fund, which is an enterprise fund, will keep residential monthly costs flat at $17.94. Waste management by our contract is increasing its cost by $1.03. We're suggesting to help the ratepayers that we don't change that $17.94 upward by that 1.03. And by doing that, we'll offset the reduction in services such as the number of dumpster days, fewer household hazardous waste events, and yard waste center. The yard waste center would be open pretty much to deal with storm events. What's key is most of that expense is driven by personnel, and we have to have staff when we have those days. The wastewater fund, which is an enterprise fund, there will be a 4% wastewater rate increase required by the consent decree. And in the stormwater fund, which is a enterprise fund, the commission approved rate changes for 24, 25, and 26. The base rate for 24 was $4.15. It'll go up to $4.67 plus changes in lot size calculations. So the general fund by pictures, as you can see, expenditures by cost category, personnel is about 68%, followed by contractual services by 24%, and the rest are smaller. The expenses by functional areas, you can see public safety is around 57%, followed by general government and judicial services, followed by community services and public works. Go to the next one. All county funds. That means all levies, all funds that make up the county budget. You can see that real estate, property taxes make up 62% of the entire budget, followed by other taxes and sales taxes and intergovernmental transfers, and the rest are smaller. You go to the county general fund just itself, 64% of it is paid for by real estate ad valorem taxes, sales tax, and other taxes make up the bulk of the other categories. Then we have smaller categories. So in a nutshell, if you look at all funds of the Kansas City, Kansas budget of $360 million, half comes from the city general fund, followed by bond and interest required payments, then then the enterprise fund that have their own revenue streams, and then special revenue funds. In Wyandotte County, you can see that 75% of the expenses of the county are funded through the general fund. And then followed by other taxes as the other levies charged to mental health, disabilities, et cetera, and then parks and recreation. I want to highlight some of what you heard tonight. We started off by talking about the compressed time frame that we had. Normally, we would have had from end of June when you made the budget approach decision to mid-September to have this presentation before you. Because revenue neutral was chosen, that time frame accelerated and we lost, like I said earlier, about 6 months of a budget process. Far less communication with you, with the citizens as this budget was being developed to get to this stage to give you a balanced budget recommendation. But I want to commend the staff and the hard work that they did to do this work in a compressed time period. Did they like it? No. They never had to do it before. But they understood that they have to follow the policy direction given by you. So they did that. And I commend them for the hard work that they did to help me present a recommended budget. And I hope you value their work to get us here. This was abnormal to them. For 28 years, they did a budget process that wasn't this. So we used the commission and mayor's priorities. We listened to community input. We talked with our employees, whether it was opinion or ideas that they wanted to share, we listened to them. And we tried to reduce the impact of cuts to our community. We know there's probably going to be changes in services. We won't know until this budget or whatever budget you pass is implemented. But it's not the same at this year because we don't have the revenue that we thought we would have had. And we've had to cover fixed costs like inflation and other personnel costs right off the top. And so that took capacity of a flat number. We had a broad-based approach to budget reductions. As you can see that most all but 2 or 3 agencies made cuts and recommendations that we incorporated here. We do anticipate service impacts, but we were trying to keep them minimal, if at all possible. So tonight, I'm giving you my recommended budget. You have the budget books in front of you. Ask you to please read them because next week you have 2 budget workshops for you to talk about crafting a budget that using mine as a foundation that you will pass on August 15th. You have to pass it by August 15th due to notice requirements that the state gave us. So that date's not negotiable. What's also not negotiable is you don't have any more money to play with. So the money that's outlined in this budget is the parameters that you have to stay within. All because of the policy direction you gave us on revenue neutral. Okay. So on Wednesday, the 7th, you will spend time talking about the county budget. On the 8th, you will talk about the city budget. Have a public hearing on the 13th where the public have input. Whatever comes from those 3 items has to have a balanced budget with revenue neutral as its foundation that you will consider and pass on the 15th. Again, this was a challenge, but throughout the process, we I've had to think about other things to do to help the long term of the community, worked with the mayor on a few items. And I want to present other things for you to consider over the next couple meetings. First of all, you gave us revenue neutral, and we heard that from the public. I think it was more than the 4 hours of testimony that we had on the 27th, because it was mentioned before that at many commission meetings. So we heard, you gave us the direction, we implemented that direction as one of the options for you to consider. Throughout this whole process, we realized even with revenue neutral, we got to get aggressive on economic development. So I was pleased to announce earlier that we hired an economic development director who will hire 2 other staff members to help her do the work that we need done in this community. Now, for us to be successful in economic development, we need to be open to change. We need to be open to be a better community. And those need to be defined through a public process. But also, some of those directions may be that people won't agree with. We don't have agreement on everything in the public sector, but we need to chart a course. And we need to limit what we ask for in investment. You know, we don't even have identified sectors we want to develop in our community. Every economic development plan has identified 2 or 3 manageable sectors that really would thrive in the environment that we have here. So we need to work on a good, that's going to challenge of the new person and her staff, is to get started on developing a economic development long-term strategy that is looking at tax base expansion, looking at job creation. And we have some elements already in place. We're building a new community college right downtown. How can we get people in there to get jobs, to fulfill the promises on their billboards? You can get a $50,000 to $70,000 job by going to their training programs. And we have jobs that are going unfilled in those categories. So there has to be a commitment if we want to succeed in economic development. It just doesn't happen. We have to entice investors, some inside, some from the outside, to call this place home. We talked about us trying to reduce our reliance on our BPU pilot revenue. And I want to let you know there's another step. It's not just reducing the 1% that we want to not collect from BPU to get toward that 9.9% promise. And meeting that promise is the first step. We reach that goal, we'll look at ways to reduce it even more. But we need to have an initial goal to meet. But during the discussion about BPU, UG bill separation, it became evident that the way we're collecting the pilot is not to our ordinance. And we've had this discussion with you all. We're supposed to be getting that money off the UG net gross operating revenue, not a direct charge to the ratepayer. We are directing this week BPU to take that off the bill starting October 1. So the consumer will not pay it. They shouldn't have been paying it all this time. So we're going to follow the law. And so I know they don't like that, but hey, follow the law. And that's what we're hearing from the public. So no one will be disconnected because they do not pay their pilot, because it won't be on the bill. The other thing that we really need to master is have a strong debt management policy and direction. We should never have reached 44% of the property tax bill going to debt. any public sector manager will know that that is too excessive. You abuse that privilege. This didn't happen overnight to get to that level. It's not going to come overnight to solve it, but we need to take concrete steps to be able to measure our reduction of reliance on debt. And that's going to have some interesting communications with you as our policymaker, with the community who have had certain benefits from debt-funded projects that maybe we can't do as much or as frequently if we had. Most of the communities I manage do use debt for special projects. Like we need to do a bridge replacement, but it's not paying for paved roads or other things like that. It's for strategic use. Now it's going to take a while, probably long after I'm dead, to get to that point, but we can start reducing our reliance on debt from the property tax bills, charges paid by our public. The last one is a project that I've been working with the mayor. And we're talking about, we've heard from many people, we would still like to look at other options to reduce our property tax liability to our citizens. I could have the clerk pass these out to the commission. It's a concept that the mayor and I have been talking about for a while. And I think it's setting the stage of when we are weaned off of the growth projects out west, is when we do benefit from the increased sales tax revenue that then will eventually come not to pay off STAR bonds or CID bonds, but then would pay off, that would come into the general fund coffers with increased sales tax revenue. Now, the temptation is take that new money and activate it and create new programs, et cetera, et cetera. We're saying, yeah, we'll reserve money for that. But we also, what do we criticize for in the region? Our tax levels. And what this is a proposal of any new taxes, tax revenue generated each year. 25% of that new goes to reduce our property tax levy request. We are prohibitive of doing a direct rebate by state statute. We cannot do that. But one way we can do it is internally calculate what we would get from sales from all the other taxes and calculate what 25% of that is and apply that to reducing before we ask for a mill rate for the mill rate hearing, is we're going to transfer that amount out of the normal request and supplant it with that sales or that revenue. What I ask for you to do is take this bill, this ordinance, read it, talk about it, but I think it's an opportunity in the next couple meetings that you can continue this march of property tax relief. You started with revenue neutral. You can continue the relief of when we get this growth revenue due to incentivized projects that will come on our rolls. We can dedicate it to a effort that provides relief to all the property taxpayers in Wyandotte, in KCK. So look at that. I hope that you saw in this budget presentation that the staff and I heard you. Revenue neutral, BPU relief, finally found somebody for economic development, giving you an interesting option for your consideration on continued relief for property taxes. Maybe not 25, but because we're making that decision in a couple of weeks, but starting in 26 and after, you set the stage for property tax relief for all citizens in KCK. So that's my budget recommendation that's before you. I look forward to being available to you as we discuss over the next week and a half to come up with a budget that you will vote on, because you have to vote on something on the 15th. We look forward to making sure that we're available to answer any and all questions. Give you our opinion on many ideas that you may have, because now this is your budget. That then I will, whatever's passed, I'm charged to implement. So look forward to working with you on the last March to an approved budget. Thank you, Commission, Mayor, for the time. And I'll say this, the experience of crafting a budget in revenue neutral. I won't share my emotions about it, but it was a good experience. I think it's a good reset for our government. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Administrator. Again, this was for information only. It is a budget proposal from our county administrator. Appreciate the staff of our county administrator and the staff that really worked hard. I know leaving here late at night sometimes on many occasions, and I believe I came in on a weekend to do some work, and the budget and finance staff were here working, putting in extra hours to get you the balanced budget that hopefully you all will see value in. Again, this is for information only for tonight. I believe the administrator went over it, the 7th and 8th, both of those times at 5 o'clock next week. And then on the 13th, the public will have an opportunity to weigh in at 6 p.m. here in these chambers. And then again, the 15th, this commission will make a decision on adopting the budget. So now questions for the Administrator, Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask about the proposed ordinance that you brought to us?
I think you need to internalize it before you ask about it. You just got it.
Okay.
5 minutes ago.
That was all yeah, thank you.
Any comments or questions from our commissioners? Okay, I'd just like to say my comment, okay. Commissioner Lopez.
There we go. Is, could I get an electronic PDF on this?
Sure. And it will be on the website tomorrow morning. Oh, you got it on today? So it's on the website now.
On the website now. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you to Administrator Johnston and then all the staff. Every single one that worked so hard in such a compressed time frame to bring it. It's really, it's not outrageous. I think it's reasonable. I know it's difficult. We will feel and miss some of what's being proposed in terms of various reductions and cuts. I will live through it. It won't be easy. Sometimes it won't be fun.
Right.
But I mostly just want to express my appreciation to the staff who came along with and did what you asked them to do and provided those departmental recommendations and really, I think, really stepped up to say, yes, we will do this and we will do it together as a team. And that's really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Administrator. I too wanted to offer my appreciation for what you have done and what the staff has done to present a good shot at a reset. And that's really, I have to look to the mayor for this. I would not have voted for revenue neutral. I did not in the past, but I thought it was time to give it a shot. But now I'm asking that we all give this a shot too, and not be quick to decimate what data has driven, some data-driven decisions, and people who are professionals in this. And I don't know if people were in shock, but as they used to say in church, I expected a bigger amen on no pilot. People may be in shock yet still, and for the reduction in the rate. So you administrator and staff have really tried to implement on paper what our constituents said they wanted. So I'm just hopeful that we will give it a fair shot. And I look forward to reading the proposed resolution that you just gave us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, I'll just conclude by saying, I just want to thank the community. Those that have came out over since I've been mayor and have had the courage to really guide through your request to this commission, have been patient, have sacrificed, have endured, and really just poured your heart out to this commission, to me. I know I go around the community just about every day, and I hear it, I get it. I get blamed for it, but that's okay. I'm the mayor, and I'm supposed to provide leadership to this commission, as well as recommendations, but also our staff here, the professionals that work here every day. I was one of those professionals, and I know that they get it as well. They live here because they have to, and they care and they love this community too. And the same burden that a lot of folks express that they felt, I've watched some of those same employees come and they spoke and came to the podium and spoke and said, oh, I share in that sentiment. Let's, like Commissioner Townsend said, let's just take a pause and hit reset. I want to make it clear, this is not a tax cut by any means. It is a pressure point on tax increases for 1 year. But I can tell you, and I've said it before, and I share the sentiments of Commissioners Burrows and Bynum, who are the at-large, this is a shared sacrifice budget proposal coming from our administrator and our staff. But I can say that staff listened. This commission listened when you've got a unanimous vote of 9-0 for revenue neutral. Staff took that call to action. And what you've got tonight is not only a pressure point on tax increases, we heard you on pilot. Not only is there a pilot reduction, but then also the pilot is coming off your bill. So those individuals that suffer and are impacted the most by the pilot being on their bill and may have gotten cut off, that will not be an issue for you any longer. We have an economic development director that's been hired by our administrator, and we applaud him for that because economic development and bringing in those additional tax revenue and being strategic about that is really what is going to move us out of our financial challenges. And I know that's something that a lot of commissioners said they wanted. Our administrator and our staff have delivered. The proposal that the 25% of all future revenues into our general fund that I've talked to the administrator about, and he did a lot of work on this and thought about it and got that to you before today, is to address the concerns of we can't do revenue neutral forever. And I just want to make that clear. There's cost increases, there's contractual increases. This is an opportunity for this commission to take a look and say, okay, how do we address the concerns of our residents here in Kansas City, Kansas, about increase in valuations that cause property tax increases? Well, it's coupled with economic development. If we're really going to be intentional, strategic, and put a full forth effort into expanding economic development opportunities here in Wyandotte County, those additional revenues could go to, again, putting a pressure point and holding the line on property tax increases. But coupled with that, and I know that Commissioner Burrows and Stites, and I appreciate them, just so you know, if you don't know, they've taken the lead on a committee, because part of the problem we've heard, and we've heard it from residents again, is the bureaucracy to try and get things done and do business here from developers is less than favorable. And so they've taken it upon themselves to work with you in the community to bring proposals to this commission to hopefully streamline that process, to make this one of the most entrepreneur and business-friendly communities anywhere you can find in the metro and hopefully in the nation. And I think that we create those types of things and we look at creating a safe and livable community with the right amenities, then we can have, hopefully we can anchor those individuals, that 70% of those folks that make real good money here in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, but don't want to live here. And we can capture some of those individuals to anchor them right here in our community so they can spend their time, their energy, as well as their tax dollars to hopefully further expand our tax base. So again, thank you, Administrator, and thank you to staff. Thank you to our community and all those that have listened and have weighed in on this. Again, you have another opportunity. And thank you to this commission for at least going down this road and trusting our employees to get us hopefully to where we may not want to be completely, but hopefully in a place that we can all live with and be comfortable through this next year. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
That takes us to the next item, which is the mayor's agenda. It's only one item on my agenda. It is a veto of the ordinance previously passed by this governing body related to the Community Benefits Fund and home repairs. And it's not so much a veto of the entire benefits fund. I think it's a great fund. I know Commissioner Davis worked hard on this. And so it's no slight or on his work. But there were some questions that came up at the last meeting that I had when I really dug in and looked at this that relates to the amendment that was passed. And that's what's actually being vetoed, not the entirety of the Community Benefits Fund. But the amendments that were passed creates unclear roles of both the Livable Neighborhoods Task Force and the Community Benefits Advisory Board. Also, the amendment does not show the correct pathway according to our ordinance and the delineation of duties of both the executive branch and the legislative branch for any committee recommendations, which is the first come to the mayor and the county administrator to be assigned for disposition to a standing committee. And then what happens when it gets to that standing committee to make sure that it gets to this full commission for final approval. So this veto is basically my way of saying there's no clarity in that amendment. And I would like for there to be clarity to come back to this body once that's fully outlined by Commissioner Davis in his committee. And so that's what this is about. I would like to veto this to go back to Commissioner Davis's standing committee so he can really make that a little clear to this body and to the community on those items that were of concern. And therefore, that's my veto. Do any members of the commission have any questions? Okay, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, not question, but comment. Was there room just to do an amendment or was a veto the only mechanism that could be used?
Well, I had to veto that so it wouldn't take effect and then have it sent back to have an amendment that appropriately address these questions. As
Okay,
opposed to it going in effect and then having an amendment on an amendment and then on an amendment. If that
okay.
makes sense.
I just seeing this, I couldn't recall when we as a body had approved it, but my thought was just given your concerns, was veto the only way to address them. That was it. So,
I think that was the quickest way for me to get it pushed through, but different doesn't mean deficient. It just means, because the goal is still the same, is just to get it back to Commissioner Davis, have him take a second look and hopefully get a modified amendment to this body for final approval. Trust me, this veto is in no way opposition to the community benefits fund, the home repairs, or even what's there. It's just to get a little more clarity. Thank you, Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know one of your concerns was clarity of process and pathway. I know within the ordinance itself, it says that the advisory board is the one who are to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners on the allocations. And one of the things that we had, the amendment was allowing some of that money to go towards minor home repair, which livable neighborhoods does. From what I know is after the advisory board provides the recommendations to this board, the board approves it, then it's up to the task force and livable neighborhoods to go through their own process that they have of allocating those minor home repair dollars. Because after we had the discussion and the vote on the amendment, we had a presentation from livable neighborhoods and they talked through their process of how they allocate their own minor home repair dollars. And so I understand maybe we do need to look at it and have more clarity, but it seems there was a path, but it maybe needs to be more clear. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, Commissioner. There's actually two, and I talked to my chief of staff as well as Irene Caudillo and Mr. Murray. There was, I guess the clarity is you've got the Livable Neighborhoods Task Force, and you also have the Community Benefits Advisory Board, just to make sure that there's no overlap and there's no just that delineation of who does what. So I wouldn't want, if I'm the chair of this board, to say, no, you can't do this. That's my role, just to make it just clear on how it gets there. And then it does have to have a recommendation to a standing committee, according to the ordinance. It's just the appropriate pathway from ordinance and practices. Normally it'd come to the Meehan County Administrator, you get assigned to a standing committee. You all would debate it, vote on it, and it'd go to the full commission to finalize those funds being transferred. So, okay, thank you, Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I heard you say in part of your explanation that there were questions, and I was just curious if you've shared what the questions are with Commissioner Davis yet, or just please make sure that you do so that he can clarify and bring to our committee what it is you're seeking to know or understand. That's it. Thank you.
That was my plan, and to fast track this to his next standing committee to be addressed. And again, I'm not opposed to the actual community benefits and the home repair. It's just more what are the processes, the system, and the logistics on that, and to make it just apparent with these two different overlapping, the Livable Neighborhoods Task Force Board, and then you have the Community Benefits Board. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on their roles. So that's what it was. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. I just want to make it clear on the concerns of Commissioner Ramirez Townsend and Commissioner Bynum. I will stay true to my word. This will get fast tracked with the recommendations to Commissioner Bynum. And when it comes out of standing committee, once that's done, you won't have any other issues from me. It's just so. That takes us to the regular consent agenda. Do any members of the Commissioner or County Administrator wish to set aside any items on the regular consent agenda? And if item is not set aside, all items on the regular consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
Ramirez, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burns.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Stites.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, that takes us to the standing committee agenda. First item is under this agenda is approval of a resolution amending deadlines related to the issuance of industrial revenue bonds for the American Roll Project. This item was heard by the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee, chaired by Commissioner Burrows on Monday, July 29th, 2024, and approved to be fast-tracked to this meeting tonight. I'll ask Commissioner Burrows to weigh in with some remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was requested to come to the full body for the understanding that this just sets a hearing date for the extension is all it is. It's granting an extension from, I believe it was July 31st till December 31st. And it's just to allow time here. And if there's questions, legal questions, we do have Todd LaSala here that represents our interest in this contract negotiation. And included in that is the request for IRBs, but that allows the contract to continue to be discussed and a development agreement to come forward. But we needed to extend this time frame to allow our council a chance to continue to negotiate with the American Royal. So I'd make a motion for approval.
Motion for approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Well, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burns.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Lopez.
No.
Stites. Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to the last item on the standing committee's agenda is a resolution approving the Community Development 2024 Annual Action Plan, which is submitted annually to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This plan allows the unified government to receive 3 grants: Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, the Home Investment Partnership Grant, which is abbreviated HOME, and the Emergency Solutions Grant, which is ESG. This item was heard by the Neighborhoods and Community Development Standing Committee chaired by Commissioner Davis on Monday, July 29th, 2024, and approved to be fast-tracked to this meeting. Commissioner Davis is unable to attend tonight, but we will allow Commissioner Bynum to speak in his absence.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, comes to us annually. We do have Kay Sharp here. She's our interim director of community development. So if there are questions, we certainly can ask Ms. Sharp to come to the podium. However, this is annual action by this governing body, and it is a draft 24 annual action plan. And one thing that's interesting to me a little bit is that the 24-year for community development, or I should say for these HUD dollars, starts so late in the actual fiscal year of 2024. But it is the 2024 annual action plan. And as the mayor described, it is the combination of community development block grant, home investment partnership, and emergency solutions. So I would move approval of the resolution that approves the draft of the plan.
Ramirez, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burns.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Stites.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. There is no further business on tonight's agenda. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second,
Council
Bynum.
second.
There's a motion. Was there a second?
Bynum.
Okay, Commissioner Lopez.
Yeah, hey, we have, I had you blue sheet that. Oh, disregard, we got it. Never mind, I'm sorry.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Clerk roll call.
Roll call, Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burns.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
Kane. Lopez.
Aye.
Stites.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.